Yo, what's poppin' everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Zach Lesage here. We're going to be covering over the top 10 best decks heading into May 2024. That includes Temporal Forces, and we've seen the results of EUIC, Orlando, and Sao Paulo, so we have a lot of great deck lists. I'm going to cover the decks that I think are the best positioned going forward into events such as Indianapolis Regionals and more. If you like this video, give this video a like, share, subscribe, and let's jump into our number 10 pick. Kicking into our number 10 spot is Turbo Iron Hands. Now, this is a deck that really took off a little bit in Japan before EUIC, saw some results at EUIC, and it seems to be dwindling in popularity ever since. It's likely due to a poor Charizard EX matchup. However, this Diego Casaraga, our former world champion inspired list, does seem promising in the right metagame. Is that right metagame going to be Indianapolis? Likely not. Charizard EX is expected to be 20 to 30% of the field, meaning that you have a pretty tough matchup unless you're able to turn one Iron Hands your opponent with Electric Generator and really run through their setup. As this deck finds itself more and more positioned poorly in the metagame, I wouldn't be surprised to see it slip out of the top 10. However, it is still quite a powerful deck in general, and there are quite a few decks where it's just like it has some poor matchups, but it is quite powerful. There's about 30 or so viable decks, so this deck being at number 10 right now, certainly fantastic. And there's decks that are dying to be in the top 10 that also can top 80 regionals at any given point. My advice, if you're trying to play this deck for Indianapolis, if you're trying to make a deep run, this might be the play. If you're trying to get points, this might not necessarily be the best play. You got to dodge some Zards, hope for a little bit of luck, and see how it goes. If there's any cards that you need from this deck or any of the other decks featured in this video, we do have our sponsors over at Kayfabe Cards. You can check out their TCG Player Pro link in the description below. If you can get these cards online, consider picking up some code cards at ptcglstore.com using code TSS5 for a discount. Or if you're trying to build this deck in any capacity, consider sleeving it in some katanas from Ultimate Guard. All the lists are available for copy and paste in the pinned comment below. Lost finding its way to number 9, and while this might be a little bit low on the list, is Lost Zone Toolbox. Another one of these decks that I believe Diego Casaraga played. This is very heavily inspired by Pedro Torres' list from EUIC and Nicholas Galaz's list from Sao Paulo Regionals. Now, Lost Zone Box has found itself in an interesting spot in the metagame where it kind of has decent matchups against a lot of things, but it doesn't necessarily find its stride against any particular one deck. Sure, we have Iron Hands, which could be great against a Lugia deck or a single prize card deck. Hoopa EX gives us some opportunity against these Iron Hands decks. Roaring Moon EX gives you that Oko potential. And of course, we need Raikou for a 4 Steel Stoneable card. The reason why it's probably so low on this list is just because it can't necessarily, like, have an answer against everything. And as our metagame is quite wide, it doesn't necessarily do bad against anything. It doesn't necessarily excel against anything either. On top of being a very hard deck to pilot, I do feel like Lost Zone Toolbox is really one of those decks where, like, if you're feeling Lost Zone Box, this could be the play. If you're not really a Lost Zone Box player at this point, maybe it's not necessarily worthwhile to pick up right now. Might be better to be playing a different Lost Zone variant, such as Lost Zone Tina, which we may or may not see later on in this list. We'll have to see how this deck plays out, but losing a bunch of Pokemon V that we could put 4 Steel Stone on certainly has hurt this deck in our post-rotation formats. I don't want to make it sound all negative because this deck is absolutely fantastic once it sets up. Just like any other Lost Zone box deck, it is going to be quite difficult to play out perfectly. Jumping into number 8, we have Arceus V-Star with Giratina V-Star. Arctina's got to be somewhere, and while it did do very well at Orlando Regionals, I do feel like it's one of those things where it's not particularly well positioned unless you run into Zard all day. Zard could be anywhere between 1 out of every 5 decks you play, or 1 out of every 3 decks you play. So depending on how you look at it, you might be able to grab 3 free wins just by playing Arctina. I feel like this deck struggles against a lot of other decks, beyond it just being relatively consistent. Just being able to set up, accelerate energies, disrupt your opponent with Judge, Eerie, or Iono, and Lost City can really take away some of your opponent's key pieces if they're missing anything. I almost like adding Iron Leafs to other decks right now, so I'm not really sure how I feel about this, where it's just like, I like Iron Leafs, I like Tina, I like playing Tina in a non-Lost in Box deck. I don't know if I like Arc Tina. And I feel like I'm trying to go somewhere with this and there's not really anywhere to go. My personal feelings on this deck are, it can be a little bit inconsistent and it's very easy to play around. However, its inconsistency is also weird because it's arguably one of the most consistent decks in format. So maybe my answer is I really just don't know how I feel about this deck, and I feel like it's relatively easy to play around. And I think that's probably what the answer that I'm going to go with for this video, is that I think you can play around this deck fairly well. The good thing about it is you're going to accelerate energies more often than not, and that's really good. So if you want a deck that's going to have a similar strategy almost every single game, this deck is going to give you Pokemon Deja Vu. Game after game, arc, attach, accelerate, go on. Not necessarily the most exciting gameplay, but it might get you to where you want to go. Flying high to number 7 is Lugia V-Star with Chinchino. Now, it hurts me personally to put the list that I made top 32 with 19th place out of like nearly 2,400 players with at Orlando at number 7, but it's got to go somewhere on the list, and it's hard when we have a few set decks within the top 5 just based off results alone. People aren't really playing Lugia yet, and I think that Lugia could be well positioned going into Indy. It doesn't necessarily have the best chien-pao matchup, and it's probably going to lose to future hands, but which deck isn't going to be losing to a couple decks? And that being said, you could still beat those other decks. It's not impossible. We have the damage output. Where this deck really shines is that you're able to take out control decks. You have a favorable Charizard matchup, and you beat a lot of other things, like you just beat Arc decks. You beat Roaring Moon because of Mist Energy. Like, there's a decent bit of decks where you're like, okay, I do well against this deck. So as this metagame kind of progresses and stuff like that, Lugia has found itself as one of the more viable options to go deep into the tournaments. If I was trying to make day 2 at Indy Regionals, I'd likely be playing Lugia V-Star. This is still one of my top choices, and there's really not that much that's holding me back. I am holding a masterclass for this, so if you got a chance to check out about that yet, check out my Twitter. There's links for there. You could totally check that out for a group session on Metafy. Would be worthwhile if you're considering making it. I think this would be a fairly easy day 2 because it's a straightforward deck to play, very well positioned. However, the deck can have some consistency problems, so do keep that in mind. Sliding into number 6 is Moon with the Dunsparce. Now, this is another deck that I'm holding a masterclass on, and I recently took this deck to a 2nd place finish at a large Toronto League Cup and a top 4 finish in another Toronto League Cup, losing against Rowan Stavenhow, one of the best players in the world. This is my current iteration of the deck with Iron Leafs EX, trying to beat the Charizard EX matchup. Now, I have gone back and forth on should I have Pokegears or Trekking Shoes, still trying to figure it out. However, I do think this list is quite solid for the deck, and being able to be a single prize card deck with Roaring Moon, the baby Roaring Moon that is, and then being able to pull out big Roaring Moon EX with a Seda, a Dark Patch, and an Attach is crazy. But you could also Seda on grass, and then burst forward with Iron Leafs EX. So even though it is the wrong kind of Paradox Pokemon for an ancient deck, it does have the synergy here with Professor Seda's Vitality. The Dunsparce really allows you to become immune to Iono and Roxanne, just because you could plan them in play, and they are a great pivot option, so you could send one up, use Dark Patch, and shuffle it back. So there's a lot of cool things we can do here. I think this deck is fantastic. I am holding a masterclass on this one as well. I promise these are the only 2 masterclasses I'm going to plug. So if you haven't got a chance, check out my Twitter, social medias, and the YouTube community just for information on that. It would be fantastic to see some of you show up and support and learn about these decks. I do think that this is probably going to be one of, like, it's either this or Lugia for me at Indy. So they're my top choices. If not, maybe I'll just default on Zard like a lot of other players. We're finding its way into number 5 is Gardevoir EX. Now, this is Josh Frank's top 4 list from Orlando. Shout out Josh Frank for that TSS win, for bringing us that awesome finish and seeing so much success with this awesome deck. Gardevoir EX is back, and it doesn't necessarily need the Chilling Reign version to see success. And being able to slow your opponent down with Klefki and Fluttermane in the early game, being able to spread damage with Fluttermane or Screamtail, and being able to hit for large numbers of damage with Drifloon can be absolutely fantastic. This well-built version of Gardevoir EX is likely going to see an uptick of play going into Indy, which gives it the number 5 position. It's not necessarily the easiest deck to play in the world. However, it is going to be one of the most effective decks when played correctly. So as we kind of go through the metagame, see exactly what's going on, Gardevoir EX is just a fantastic option going forward, as it once was before. It's a little bit different than what we had before because we used to have the Chilling Reign Guardy as our main attacker. We're now switching into some basic Pokemon, which does give us some recovery options. And we can also give those Pokemon a large amount of HP when it comes to Bravery Charm, Luck's Cape, and Hero's Cape as well. So keep your eyes peeled for some interesting ways to play this deck. I think that this is going to be one of the decks that's going to spike up a little bit compared to what it was once before. So if you haven't got a chance to play it yet heading into Indy, give it a try. Slipping its way to number 4 is Roaring Moon with Koraidon and Fluttermane, aka Ancient Box. Ancient Box came second place at the Orlando Regional Championships with Jake Ewert grabbing that silver medal at the finals. Now, this is really one of those decks that it's kind of powerful. However, it has a slightly unfavorable Zard matchup, which is really holding it back because it has quite good matchups across the board otherwise. So if you're running into chien-pao, honestly one of the more favorable matchups. If you're running into a lot, I could just name off decks. Basically, this deck struggles a little bit against Zard, and it beats pretty much everything else. So in a world where Zard is going to be 1 to 3 to 1 to 5 of your games, you got to really take a choice. This would be the type of deck where I think it'd probably be good to get points with at Orlando or Indy. I keep on wanting to say Orlando, but it's because Orlando just happened. It's good to get points with at Indy. It might not necessarily be the deck that you want to guarantee that day 2 with. However, there's probably going to be a few that slip through the cracks and have some deep runs at the tournament as well. This deck smokes the Guardy deck that we just saw, and that's one of the things that the Guardy players are definitely going to be worried of going forward. So as this deck continuously sees success, it might be worthwhile to play. And the deck does have Cobalion to do some extra damage against Charizard. So maybe, just maybe, there's an opportunity there to see some success. Will it happen? We'll have to find out. But stay tuned for more because Indy is going to be happening quite soon in the next 2 weeks. We're finally getting up there and we're now in the top 3. Lost Zone Tina has really seen a lot of success in the past formats. And after rotation, it seems like it's seeing the same level of success. With Isaiah Bradner coming second place with his version at EUIC with Banette, a lot of people would have thought that that would have been the way to go. But Azul and Co are really playing this more kind of toned down version of kind of regular looking Tina. The big change that I've made is I've cut the Manaphy from this deck for a second Sableye, as players are cutting Jirachi from their lists. Sableye can be quite important in this upcoming format. I recently took Lost Tina to a 5th place finish at a large, like 50-ish player cup. So it's worked out great. I lost to a Gardevoir, which is a tough matchup, off my opponent getting a top deck Iono to put my game-winning boss at the bottom of my deck. It happens, but I do think that this version of the deck is going to be quite particularly successful going forward, because Lost Tina doesn't necessarily lose to too much, except for just like variants and Gardevoir. Not really too many tough matchups out there. I mean, every matchup is kind of difficult because this is a very difficult deck to play, but I do think it's one of those things where Lost Tina seems like it's in a strong position as we go forward into the metagame. It's a really well-defined list, and of course, having the Grass package plus Star Requiem against Charizard is going to be a no-brainer inclusion. Absolutely fantastic. What will we have at our number 2 deck? Put your best guess in the comments below. We're so close. I'm sure some of y'all can get it, but maybe you won't. Let's find out. Jumping into our number 2 deck, we have chien-pao. Now, chien-pao is really a deck that has not lost a lot from rotation, and if anything, I found that it's gained. Now, since it's game stuff, let's go over that. Previously, this deck had to play Battle VIP Pass in our pre-rotation format. Sure, that could grab chien-pao, but in a format where or in a deck where we just want to grab Bidoof and Frigivax and stuff like that, we can miss Buddy Poffin turn 1 and still have a chance at succeeding the game. If anything, Buddy Poffin was not a nerf, it was really bringing an extra layer of depth to the deck, allowing you to have an opportunity to play the deck a little bit different. So the key thing about this format is the decks are now slightly better when they're able to utilize cards like Buddy Poffin or replace other cards that they've missed with other new cards. In this case, chien-pao has got that huge dub, that huge that reverse nerf where it's Buddy Poffin's better. The deck is better. It's better positioned in our current meta game. It has strong matchups. It has this. So really, that's what the reason why chien-pao is up there. It doesn't necessarily have like decks that it's like, oh, it's absolutely destroying all these decks, but it's very consistent. It's very aggressive. It's very powerful, and it's not poorly positioned. So that's why this deck's at number 2. It's also incredibly popular, and I expect it to be somewhere between 10 to 15% of the metagame heading into Indianapolis Regionals. What's going to be our number 1 deck? I'm sure a lot of y'all know because we haven't seen it by now, but we're going to jump into it right now. Boom! Here you have it. Zard is flying high, and this is my current build of the deck based off of Rowan Stavenow's incredible run winning 2 cups in Toronto, which is also based off of Tord Reklev's and Liam Halliburton's list that they've seen success with. Key things here are that there's a second Charmeleon, giving yourself some more opportunities to just not get devoed or to not get hit as hard with devo or to just evolve into a Charmeleon right away. Because being more will naturally have it in our hand a little bit more. We have Bib as an added extra consistency, especially against Iono and Roxanne. It's also a single prize card consistency card, unlike Pidgeot. Double Turo gives you opportunities to take 2 prizes off the board and turn yourself into a single prize card deck. Overall, this build is very popular, very aggressive, and it's arguably going to be one of the most played decks that we've ever seen at a regionals. These regionals are approaching over around 2,500 players. If we're 20% of the field, we're looking at like 200, or we're looking at 10% of the field would be 250. We're looking at 20% of the field. We're looking at 500 players playing Zard at this regionals. So be prepared for Zard at Indy. This would be a great Zard deck to choose, maybe try out, pick up. I have seen a few players locally playing Bib Zard. Not sure if I think that's better or not, but it is something to consider in general. That being said, what do you think about Zard? What do you think about this list? Let me know in the comments below. The Shuffle Squad gets back to all of our comments, so let us know. We totally would love to hear back from you. Let me close things out. That's what we got going on for our video today. We have Zard on top again, and after winning EUIC, winning Orlando, winning Sao Paulo, I think Zard is just the best deck in the format. It might not necessarily be the most interesting deck, and some might find it boring, but it is quite powerful, and most of its matchups, even its bad ones, are totally winnable. If you haven't already learned enough about Charizard from watching this video, we have a lot of great other videos on the Shuffle Squad, and a lot of our members do offer coaching, including myself, so hit me up at metafy.gg/@Zach Lesage. I'm also running a couple courses on Roaring Moon and Lugia, so if you haven't got a chance to check those out, there is a link posted in our YouTube community and on my Twitter accounts. I got a lot of testing to do for Orlando. You can see that I've been, or not Orlando, for Indy. I got all of my decks. I got my stickers there, but I got my decks ready. I've been play testing, getting ready. Got a couple League Cups going on this weekend, so I hope that I'm ready for that event. But if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, let us know in the comments below. Totally love to get back to you. If you need any cards before Indy, check out our sponsors. Some of them might be vending at the event. Some of them might be able to get you stuff. There's also codes. Great Ultimate Guard products like this Omni Hive. I absolutely love it. Travel with it everywhere. And that's what we got going on. I'm going to stop babbling on, and I'll let y'all go enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much, and have a great one. Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes. You made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching this entire video from the Shuffle Squad. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate each and every person that supports our content, watches what we have going on every single day, every single week, even from time to time, and continuously allows us to have a forum to project our creative content towards the Pokemon TCG community. So if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, we'll catch you with our next video. Thanks again. Take it easy.